The world's preeminent business growth expert, Jay Abraham.
Jay is not you.
Jay showing you how to find more money. He's making it rain.
This is a man that you cannot afford to be without.
1-800-88-12345. This is the ultimate entrepreneur with Jay Abraham.
Hi, it's Paul Durante. Today, something completely different. We'll play back an actual Jay Abraham conference call, so the sound will be unlike previous shows. People pay literally thousands of dollars to be on these types of calls with Jay, and now you'll hear what one sounds like. Jay speaking with Marylou Tyler. She's a master at cracking the code behind turning cold calls into qualified sales ops. Her #1 best-selling book, Predictable Revenue. Turn your business into a sales machine. She transformed Salesforce.com, a huge achievement. 1-800-88-12345. That's the ultimate entrepreneur hotline powered by Dial 800. Get more calls, more sales, more response with a custom memorable number like ours from dial800.com. They have amazing customer service. Raw and uncut, Jay Abraham when we get back.
Welcome to Play It, a new podcast network featuring radio and TV personalities talking business, sports, tech, entertainment, and more. Play it at play.it.
The world's preeminent business growth expert, Jay Abraham. Jay showing you how to find more money. He's making it rain. 800-88-12345. This is the ultimate entrepreneur with Jay Abraham.
Hi, it's Paul Durante. Welcome back. This is exclusive, an actual Jay Abraham conference call.
I want to talk about a couple of things that are semi-random, but they are things that have come up in my day job that I thought would be very useful to remind you or to address or to maybe a little deeper explore. And I'm sure I've talked about them, but I want to talk about them again and maybe from a different vantage point. When I get involved privately working with a company, there is a default process that I always use. What's the word I want to use? It's not as formal as most people might think, but it's what I've done all my life. The first thing I do is I look at the existing business activity. I look at what action, what message, what media, what proposition is driving, whether it's prospects who have to be converted or buyers who hopefully are going to be resold or upsold, or whether it's static buyers who buy one time. I look at how effectively the mechanism, the media, the distribution channel, the message that that company is making is or is not, and I look at what they're not doing. But the first thing I do is assuming the company is profitable. If it's not profitable, unless they just buy a day of my time, I probably, frankly, wouldn't get involved unless it was huge critical mass and velocity and momentum and moving parts, and they just were all of a sudden not making money. But if it was a never profitable business, I wouldn't be involved with it, probably. If it's a profitable business, then my first default is going to be, what can I do to make what they're already doing perform better? Which is usually not that hard. And it's many different nuances that can be done. For example, if they are using print media, not that they are, but the first question is it as efficient as other ways to reach the defined market? The answer is yes or no. If it's yes, is the message as powerful? Is the headline connote the message? Does the body copy compel and stimulate the reader to want to take whatever action is optimal, whether it's a call, a visit, a request for a person to come to you, something, and then after that, I look at what happens in the transaction. And by that, I mean, if it's a external transaction where you read the ad or you hear the commercial or you see the landing page and you buy, it's one thing. If it's a transaction where it's multi, I guess I'd call it multi-activity, where you call or you attend or you come to a seminar, a dinner, or a showroom, or an office, or whatever, then I look at what happens when the prospect takes action. I put myself on the receiving side of that, and I say, what can be improved there? Then I look at what's called breakage, and breakage is really a dynamic that it probably is defined many different ways. Breakage in lead generating or prospect generating and conversion means people that either contact you but don't buy, come to you but don't buy, you go to but don't buy. It could also mean people who visit the website and don't do whatever you want them to do, opt in, ask for something. But you need to know what it is, and you need to know how to improve it. One of the classic memories in my mind from when the internet first started out is that somebody one time came to me and said, I'm getting, I can't remember, like 50,000 visitors a month, and I'm closing 0.5%. I need to figure out how to get 100,000. And I said, why in the world would you want it that onerous of a challenge? Why don't you first work on trying to get 0.5% to 1%? But people look at responses and results as a given. They accept it. They don't realize that in any transaction, there are many what we call breakdowns that can be turned into breakthroughs. And it's a little generalized because each and every one of you is somewhat different. The way you reach your market, the proposition you make to your market, the call to action you're asking of your market, the message you give the market when they act is different. But I'm telling you all that I strongly encourage. And sadly, but truthfully, a lot of you don't do your homework. And a lot of you go right back to status quo, and I'm not going to change that by harassing you, but I strongly urge all of you to look at your current revenue activities and question as many, if not every part of it that you can identify and examine. And I'm talking about everything from, if you're doing the media, is there a better way to use the media? Is there any kind of select? Is there any kind of a distribution segmentation that's going to get you a more probable prospect? Is there any kind of a core list that is worth paying a premium rather than paying for a lot of people that aren't buyers? Is there a headline, a message, a proposition that's better? Is there a positioning that's better? Is there a risk reversal? And risk reversal doesn't just mean if you buy, I will protect you. It means risk of even taking action, investing time, giving me your phone number, getting on the phone with a salesperson, giving me your email. That's risk, and you have to think about that. How do you abate, eliminate, overcome all of those risk factors? Next is how do you enhance the payoff, not just overcoming the risk. That's one thing, but enhancing the payoff, whether it's a free report, whether it's an eye-opening assessment, whether it's, you spend $100 and you'll get $20 of your choice of this, whatever it is, normally and in high probability, most, not all of you, but most of you are not optimizing what you're doing right. And if you're not optimizing what you're doing, and I always say what you're doing right now may be the dumbest, and I don't mean it as an individual accusation. I'm just saying that a lot of people have built a business on a very, very impractical, suboptimal, highly underperforming, revenue-generating, media, not maximizing, but diminishing process. And there are alternatives that are much higher yielding, much more direct access, much more powerful. But I'm not even getting there yet. I'm just saying whatever you're doing, however you're doing it, and however it's doing can probably be enhanced.
Can you hear me now?
Is that Marylou?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'll come to a stopping point. You just give me like 3 minutes, and then we'll introduce you, and we'll explore how you came upon your journey, and then we'll tap into your brain for a lot of really cool things. So just for everybody, what I strongly, and I was reminded of this through a dialogue that occurred over the weekend, and I made a mental note that I wanted to share that with you beyond everything. And it's very important that you look at what you're doing and you do not accept how it's doing. And you've been trained enough by me, you've gotten enough collateral support, resource material, that shame on every one of you if you don't examine and question. And there's that quote from Socrates, which is easily adaptive to this. It's a life unexamined is a life not worth living. A business that is not constantly re-examined is a business not worth living. With that stated, Marylou Tyler, I'm delighted that you're participating vicariously on the calls, but you have graciously agreed to let us probe the depths of your very unique skill set, and I'm delighted to have you here.
Well, thank you, Jay. I appreciate being here, and thank you for the opportunity to teach what I know and get someone else as excited as I am about the opportunities in the outreach channel for business development.
What I would like to do to honor you is ask you to fill in blanks. We'll do a little bit of a Rorschach so that I don't have the right bio where I am. I do where I'm not, but I don't have it where I am, and I don't want to do you a disservice. So let's start on your sojourn. Before you wrote your book or books, you were doing something. And can you start by telling everybody in a paragraph what it is you do, and then let's talk about the adventure that got you to be doing it. Can we do that? Because I think that'll be very interesting.
Sure. I started out way back when as an engineer. I'm an engineer with computer engineering and computer science is my background. So I am a lover of data and process to begin with. As I came out of college, I was always looking at how to create process around things that we do repeatedly and repetitively. So I spent a lot of time looking at that, and unfortunately or fortunately, even though I was an operating system coder in assembly language, I was always put in a position where I needed to translate what the users wanted and what the clients wanted to the programmers, because I could speak in a way to clients that they understood the level of what we were trying to do, but also can translate that to the programming staff so that we can actually code it. So I finally threw in the towel and decided to go into marketing and sales, but from a support perspective. And all the way through this, I was always seeing things done repetitively by hand, and I always wanted to sort of package it up and make it so that it was in a really strong, repeatable, consistent, scalable process. So early on, I got involved in direct response.
When you started in direct response, tell us some of the things you did.
Well, I was always on the systems side, so in the direct response world, we were sending mail all under the umbrella of lead generation. We were always trying to start conversations with people we didn't know.
Okay.
So at the time, what was available was mail, postcards, the telephone. Predictive dialing was a big thing. It was a way
I remember.
So, I was kind of well-versed in the contact center and making lots of phone calls, sending lots of mail, and trying to get people to move from this oblivious stage of thought to, oh, this is kind of interesting. I'm thinking about it. And then finally getting to that hurting stage where they really wanted to have a conversation with us. So the goal was always to get from, we don't know who you are, to, I'd like to have a conversation with you. And I've worked on that piece of the pipeline. It's been now almost 25 years that I've been enamored with it and really trying to kind of crack the code of how does this all work.
Along that way, with those two very, very critical but very distinctive objectives, what kind of general observation, realization did you make that are universal to almost, because there got to be some universal realities in all this that became smackingly clear to you as you were doing this?
I think you've said it in some of your previous teachings with us through this process, is that human behavior has not really changed from the pre-1940s until now. We're human, and that really hasn't changed a lot. So throw all this technology at it, throw all these nuances of inbound and referral and outreach, but the core of it all is that we are human. We do go through various thought stages before we make a purchase, and that hasn't changed at all.
Very good. I like that answer. Okay, please continue.
Fast forward to this thing called the Internet, and I was then a consultant, and I usually worked with pretty large clients, like Bose Corporation was a client of mine, Orkin, MasterCard, UPS. So I was
So they were
more on
pretty
the high end.
sophisticated direct response operators.
Yes.
At least theoretically.
Yes.
Okay. A lot of data to manipulate.
Yes, which is, I love data. I mean, I'm all about data. Data to me is something where you take the emotion out of it. Because if you are a lover of data like I am, the data tells you the path. And it tells it to you in a way that completely unemotional. So, you can, and then you also want to be taking that data in and creating hypotheses from the data to then iterate and continue to try.
Can you give, just to make sure, my job is to, because I delight in discovering and learning, is to just to have a field day with your brain, but I also want to be the advocate of everybody else. So can you put a couple of examples about hypothesis and iterative thinking, just so we keep everybody in alignment with us and we don't lose them trying to figure out what the implications are?
Well, I've heard some people talk about it already on these calls, in that you go in with a strategy of where you think your fit is, who you think your best clients are, where you can add the most value. And you basically take that hypothesis, throw it into a list, and start working the list to try to generate quality conversations. Well, along the way, you start to recognize patterns, and maybe the people that you thought were a good fit no longer are a good fit. So you pull those people out and you put somebody else in its place that's a better profile for you. That's an example of letting the data help you make more informed and more quantitative and qualitative decisions.
That's great. All right, please continue.
Yeah. So then I got the Internet, and we started recognizing that.
And so you were in it right in the beginning.
Right at the beginning.
Okay.
Because most of the systems that I developed for lead generation were client-server based, which meant there was a box sitting in your office, and you would run all your stuff off of that. Then we got into this thing called the Internet and then the cloud, and all of a sudden this thing called attraction marketing started hitting and convincing and persuading people that that was the only way to market. And
do a favor to everybody. Explain what traction marketing is.
Attraction marketing is when you create messages and you cast this wide net out into the universe with your message, hoping to get whales, but you also get guppies. You also get other things that you're thinking, why am I wasting my time on this? But it brainwashed everybody to think that that's the only way to reach out to people. Let them come to you. You build it, they will come mentality, which is great. And I recommend that everyone on this call have that as part of their toolkit, their strategy. But there are two other streams that were becoming neglected as the result of everybody getting on the bandwagon. So I started getting phone calls from people saying, can you come in and do what you did way back when with the predictive dialing systems, where you just built a list of quality people, quality phone numbers, you reached out with a message that resonated so that we can capture the accounts that are best fit for us. And I thought...
and nobody was doing it back then.
No. So even I was
very exhilarating.
It's funny, my husband always tells me, just Marylou, you always get jobs where you have no clue what you're doing, but somehow you figure it all out. And I said, because I have people and I have process in my toolkit. So I just decided, you know what, this predictive dialer that we use for outbound, I wonder if we can humanize it and make it so that we have that workhorse behind us, but it's gentler in terms of its touch.
Well, I like the way you
explain it. So
that's
what led me to find Aaron Ross, and that's what led us to build this book called Predictable Revenue.
And talk about the book, but talk about, the book is the result of empirical experiences. So I want to honor you in a duality. I'd love you to, without citing everything in the book, I hope everyone will want to run out and get it, but I'd like you to explain the book, but also explain what successes and what real breakthroughs caused the book to be written?
Well, in a nutshell, I had people relying on me to replicate what we did with large predictive dialing systems in large contact centers and kind of narrow it down to an email engine, because email was the kind of nirvana of internet marketing, of internet-based marketing, because people had been doing this for inbound, and they were getting some successes using SEO and pay-per-click, but they still weren't creating a consistent machine that they could rely on for predictable revenue. So I took that knowledge of the predictive dialing world, where we put phone numbers into a list, and said, let's go and do this with email and see if we can figure it out. So we took a little company that at the time, when you heard the name, you thought their function was to outsource salespeople.
I agree.
And the name of the company was Salesforce.com. And you'd get on planes and you'd say, where are you going or who do you work for? Salesforce.com. Oh, do they outsource salespeople? That's what people thought Salesforce did.
I agree.
Because they had successes in the very small mom and pop type organizations at the time. So my colleague, Aaron Ross, went to work for them, and he ended up taking this engine of predictive dialing, really, and then applying it towards the enterprise. So he loaded up his email engine with lists of companies that were a certain size, a certain revenue, had certain stakeholders that he felt he could message to in a way that was respectful, but had this sense of urgency that they should look at this new thing. And when you apply the predictive dialing methodology of having a series of touches and having, in the predictive dialing days, it was scripts, but here it's email messages that once again pay homage to, I am at a certain level of awareness right now in the sales cycle. I am not hurting. I may be oblivious or I may be apathetic. So what Aaron did was we ended up doing emails that addressed each of those awareness states. We put them in a sequence, we let the thing run, and we ended up getting a predictable model that allowed us to know how many emails we needed to send because we got such and such response rate. And from that, we were able to convert those people to qualified opportunities.
And I want to interrupt you again respectfully. I don't think most people recognize how critical in many selling situations and many intangible, particularly, or high-priced arenas, sequential communications really are, and that they have to be able to keep, I'm using in my hands, I'm making a motion of like threading a needle and keep rethreading. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Yes. I mean, they call it now follow-up. That's the term they use.
That's a profound word.
And it's all about, it's not a one-and-done type of thing, because we're not being respectful if we don't follow up of the fact that these buyers are in different states of awareness. So either we're going to assume everybody's at the hurting stage, which is doing ourselves a disservice, or we're going to say, I'm not sure where they're at, so let me write some content that deals with oblivious or unaware people, and then I'll touch them again in a couple of days with some content that deals with apathetic and maybe aware people. And then along the way, you're sort of what we call squirrel feeding them. You're giving them little nuggets along the way that they can self-select. And from that, you get a picture of engagement, a picture of where they are in their mind. Because the content you create starts to draw the map for you of where this individual is on the scale of wanting to buy. And so that whole process, for me, became a process because we could create the signposts that said, hey, if he's in apathetic mode, let's put a link in our email that drives him to content that's more hurting mode. And the way we knew that is because our attention spans as humans increase the more we're interested in something. So the content followed suit. If they were in an interested mode, we would maybe put a piece out there that was 5 minutes of reading. If they're hurting, we may do something that's 20 minutes of reading. So we're making some assumptions, but if they click through and continue to consume content of greater length, we knew that they were ready for a conversation.
As this is going on, are you getting sub-profiles of different kinds of, whether it's demographic, like whatever the word would be, that's probably groups to target, or are you taking the macro category and just processing them through, or does it depend?
What we do is we start very systematically by saying, who are the people sitting around the table that are going to make this decision? Okay. Who do you think? Who do you think are those people? And then we load those people up into a database, a list,
okay.
And then we try speaking to each of those people via email. So this is kind of like the while you're sleeping marketing. We use the email engine for that. And then once we get somebody to consistently raise hand, we look at the data and we realize, oh, we should enter the sales cycle using marketing, or we should enter using IT, depending on, who's raising the hand higher.
Yes.
And we can tell that because of the data.
Yes.
We can look at that. Response rates, click-through rates, even open rates help us to determine the point of entry or multiple points of entry. So we're not just casting this wide net out with the hopes of somebody coming in. We are proactively reaching out respectfully, but we're also fine-tuning where should we start this conversation, at what level, and we're also learning pipeline lag, how long things take by the time we start conversation to where we enter the sales cycle.
And typically, how long does that really take? And in your work, we'll talk later, time allowing, about smaller companies and the eclectic spectrum that it's worked for. But how long does it normally take from just conceptualizing it to actualizing it to really making all these discoveries?
Well, I like to say that, depending on your willingness to change your way of thinking,
right,
and get out of this whole one-trick pony with inbound, you're looking at other streams of channel. In a month, we sort of work through exhaustively all the things we need to what I call assemble a pipeline for outreach. And we try to activate, within 30 days, a pipeline. And then we fine-tune, tweak, iterate, pivot in some cases, depending on what happens.
Sure.
So by the end of 3 months, I'd like to see opportunities coming in from that channel. That's the goal.
That's great. And then now, within the realm of your diverse experiences, can you share some profound breakthroughs and not just success stories, but some rather remarkable? It can be remarkable in the positive, or you could be incredulous in the negative about things that you discovered, as long as you're not breaching any confidence. I think that when I was younger and I did seminars and I was more granular, people used to love, we would talk about tests that did this, and we'd talk about discoveries that did this, and how doubling this would triple this, and I don't do that anymore, unfortunately, but right. I bet you got some great stories.
Definitely. Well, of course, the book itself is written on Salesforce, which was $100 million of increased revenue over a 3-year period using the framework. That's one case study, that's Salesforce, and that was, in my opinion now, it's very outdated, because the book was released in 2011, and it's 2015. A lot has happened. So once we got Salesforce, we have a baseline now of numbers, of expected workflow, of expected opportunity.
And can you extrapolate from that?
Yeah, it's basically, we try to send 50 emails a day per business developer, 250 emails a week. That's 1,000 emails a month. Of those, we are looking for what I call 100 meaningful conversations. And a meaningful conversation is defined as anything that moves you from your current position in the pipeline a step further or a step out, but it moves it into the pipeline further. So you might have learned something about the company. They're using Mac instead of Windows, so you know they're not qualified, for example. That's a meaningful conversation because you've learned something you didn't know before you start that conversation. Of those 100 meaningful conversations, we're looking for 10 to 15 people who will go through what I call the discovery or qualification process, whatever that is in your world.
Okay.
Of that 10 to 15, we're looking for 8 to 10 to actually qualify to the point where we now can hand that off to a quota-carrying salesperson. This is based, though, so I'll caution you out there, on a 3-hour and 15-minute business development sales process. And what that boils down to is a 15-minute discovery call, like an Are We a Fit call, followed by a 1-hour call with one stakeholder, followed by a 2-hour call with everyone who's involved in the process before you do that handoff to a quota-carrying salesperson.
I'm assuming, but I'm going to try to get you to extrapolate an applicability to any kind of business, that the optimal in your world has been probably high-priced, highly repetitive service. I'm sure technology is a great sector or the primary sector, but do you have sweeping examples that are outside of that, or is that your sweet spot? And I don't care. I'm just curious.
The book is written on what I just said to you. So we go in with that as the foundation because we can prove it. So,
yes.
You know, we want, but if someone comes to me and says, Marylou, my thing only takes 15 minutes, and then I know it's good, you know? So I finally ended up creating a worksheet because I'm like, okay, 15 minutes versus 3 hours and 15 minutes, you should be able to create a lot more opportunities at your level. So we look at that realistically, but, you know, I've had people who have 15 to 20-minute conversations before it's handed off. The average sale value is somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 per opportunity.
And that 10 or 15 could be one of two ways, though. It could be 10 or 15 in a single transaction, or it could be the life value of the transaction. Am I right or wrong?
It typically is a yearly value. It can be broken down by month. So I've had one client that had a $99 a month product where they did a year. What do they call that when you pay in advance? So,
sure.
And that's the low end. That made me nervous because I wasn't sure if we could. You know, we need to look at it from a resource point of view. But yeah, it works fine. They were selling a legal package to lawyers of all things, but it was $99 a month per lawyer. And so their average sales size was about $199 a month.
My background, ironically, was very analytical. It's probably, in all candor, because I've morphed to more of an eclectic strategist as opposed to an analyst. You're getting the juices flowing because I made some of my back when I was younger, it was so funny because people would analyze very superficially, and I don't think people realize, I think I may have told you, the biggest disappointment in my seminar business was I did a seminar that didn't do well with a guy named Drew Kaplan who had built the DAC catalog, which at its heyday was really cool. And the headline was The Data Speaks. And we were going to try to explain to everybody how if you just understand the data, it'll tell you how to do everything, where to go, where not to go, you know, what to do, what to say. And it was boring to people, and I thought, you guys are idiots. This is like the greatest insight in how to be successful in spite of yourself.
Right. I think the biggest aha moment of my clients when we talk about data and data is I'm not looking for vanity metrics, people. I want actionable metrics. So there's not that many of them that we have to worry about. But we do have to worry about them at every stage of the pipeline that allows forward movement.
Can you elaborate a little bit?
Instead of number of dials, I want number of meaningful conversations. You know, who cares about number of dials? I mean, yes, it is a number we do use, but at the end of the day, meaningful conversations move us further into the pipeline. So let's strive for that. I had one BDR, business development rep, who would put her coat on at 6 o'clock to go home, but she would sit there until she had one more meaningful conversation under her belt. What does that mean? That's 5 more a week, 20 more a month, times 12. Did she make her numbers? Hell yes. You know?
I love that.
And that's what's important.
Let me ask you, now let's take what you do and how you do it, and let's talk, and I want to let's start with sublime, and let's go down to mundane. And by that I mean, it's Salesforce. I mean, I've got what I'll call foundational success stories that for when I was doing them were extraordinary. But let's talk about some other interesting and meaningful successes that are very profound, even if they're not 100 million, or if they're 200 million, or if they're doubling this or that, just so people know the kind of power inherent in this kind of not just thinking but process action.
Well, one that I know you know of, which I was very reluctant because my background is business to business. I'm more of corporate, stuffy kind of people. You know, I'm not consumer-based. And I started working with real estate people. And I thought, is this going to work for real estate? And so they took me in, and we had our weekly meetings, and we ended up, it was just like knocking it out of the park kind of thing, because there were some people who embraced it, started doing it. Within 3 months, had a 160% increase in the number of opportunities going through their pipeline. It just blew me away.
Yeah, and the dollars that they're talking about are equally as significant as technology.
Yeah. I mean, there was this one guy who had a probate business. Everything was on paper, but he applied the principles of the framework, even though he had a paper-based business,